Well, good morning, Journey Community Church. We are glad to be in worship with you this morning. Last week, we got to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. We got to celebrate the fact that through Jesus, through his son, through the sacrifice he made on the cross and his resurrection from the grave, that we have a victory. We have a victory that we can claim today in this craziness that we're walking through. And so maybe you've been going through your week. Maybe you've been feeling like, man, I could really use a win. And so I would tell you this morning, your win is waiting for you, and that the Lord is waiting to meet with you and to talk with you and to tell you all the things that he has for your life. And so if you need a win this morning, know that we have a win, and that win is found in the resurrection of Jesus. So would you please stand to your feet? We have a URL that should be on the screen right now to our online campus. Our prayer room is open right now. It'll be open through the entirety of this service. If you need prayer for anything, we have people that are in that room that are just there to pray with you. And so if you at all need some prayer, we encourage you to do that. And so with that, we are going to worship this morning. Stand to your feet. I know it might be awkward because no one else here in your living room or you're in your bedroom or something like that, but so stand to your feet. Nobody is going to be judging you or anything like that. We're going to worship this morning.
Dark, and I cannot whisper away what he said in the light. And he is my firm foundation, my anchor won't be moved. Storms may collide, but my soul is on fire with his word. Oh yeah, come on. Listen to the sound. He is won the war.
Father, thank you for the victory that we have in you. Amen. This is good. Let's sing about the grace of our Father. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to feel. He brings my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Come on. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing the Lord has promised good to me. His word, my hope secures. He will my shield and portion as long as life endures. My chains are gone. I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing. Sing this out. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine. The God who called me here below will be forever mine. Oh, yeah. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. Sing it again. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. Amazing grace. Father, thank you that you've given your grace to us so freely. Father, thank you that you made that possible through your Son, Jesus. We rest in that this morning. We rest in the grace that you have poured over our lives. Father, help us to respond to the grace that you have poured over our lives. Church, let's sing this out. Father, you are great and you are good. Lift this up.
Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hand to make, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. And when I think that God is Son not sparing, sent him to die, I scarce can take it in. On the cross, that on the cross, my burden gladly bearing, he bled and died to take away my sin. Come on. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. How great you are, Lord. When Christ shall come, yeah, with shouts of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. And I will bow, then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. How great thou art, how great thou art. Oh, how great you are. Oh, how great you are. How great you are, Lord. Oh, you're bigger than all the things around. You're bigger than all the things all the things around me. You're bigger than all the things and all the things around me. Everything around me, Lord. Surround us with your love, Lord. Your love, Lord. Surround us with your love, Lord. Your love, Lord.
Struck as we're singing together how much this season reminds us that worship is it's a disciplined way we choose to live and respond to God. Maybe before we might have associated worship with what we do when we show up in a building, but there's a little bit more of a choice when you're sitting in your family room, or you're sitting like us in an empty room with just a handful of us here. That we tell our souls to declare the greatness of God. On Monday morning when we go to work, and on Wednesday, getting through the middle of the week, that we choose to live in such a way that we are focused on and declaring the greatness of God. It's a choice that we make. It's a faithful response to who God is. And I'm grateful that we get to do it together this morning, wherever you find yourselves, that we're choosing to praise God for His grace poured out, His love, His mercy, His worthiness of our worship. And we're going to take time right now to have a chance just to respond to God as we give. Another way that we choose to focus on who God is, to focus on God's provision, to declare God's greatness as we respond to His provision with our stewardship, our giving. So whether you're kind of making a mental note in this moment to send a check, as many of you have been doing and been faithful in that, or you're going to text to give or set up giving online, we want to respond. It's one of the ways that we say, God, you are great. You are always great. We want to respond to you with wholehearted worship in all things. Well, I don't know if any of you joining us in worship this morning, if you've noticed that life is a little bit different these days. I don't know if you noticed, maybe you spend a little bit more time at home, or maybe your work situation has changed. We're living in some extraordinary, unprecedented days, and we've talked about that a lot. But I have to confess, is anybody like me, you're having some days where like you've had enough of pandemic conversation? Like you've heard enough of COVID-19 to last you a lifetime? Like you maybe just can't bring yourself to watch one more press conference or hear one more thing that is going to impact us? I've been there a little bit here and there, and I'm still tuning in and trying to stay informed and all of that, but I want to tell you that this message series that we're starting today, we're gonna turn the page a little bit and step into a new season in terms of what we're going to focus on in worship. It's going to come up because it's a thing we're all living through. But one of the things that concerns me is that it seems some people have chosen to respond with a posture of we're just going to wait it out. We're going to kind of put life on hold, and we're going to get through through this. And we're just kind of waiting for it to come to an end, for us to get back to normal, which I think most of us have accepted isn't really going to happen. It's going to be back to a new normal, but it's going to be completely different as we walk this out. And as we've been kind of walking through this and thinking about how we're responding and where we're landing in terms of our faith journey in this process, I've been reminded of a quote from, it's a favorite movie of mine. Don't judge me because the whole movie's not great, but I really enjoy the movie, Shawshank Redemption, all right? And there's a line that gets repeated a few times, and Red says it at the end after he's out of prison. He's kind of in this moment of what's next with his life. And it's just that simple line where it says it's time to get busy living or get busy dying. And I want to tell you that this Overflow message series is an invitation for all of us to get busy living. In this season and in every season, for us to get busy living and experiencing God's plan for our lives. And so we're going to be in Psalm 23, maybe one of the most well-known passages of Scripture to humanity. And I think I'm probably going to read it each week in a different version because it tends to make something that's familiar maybe sound a little bit more fresh to us. So I don't know what you're used to it. Some of you memorized it in the King James Version, and that's the only way you can ever say it. I myself did it in the NIV and the King James, but this is the New Living Translation version of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to His name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. So here's the foundational principle that all 8 weeks of this series in the 23rd Psalm is going to be grounded on. That you were created to enjoy overflow living. You and I, we were created to enjoy overflow living. We're kind of taking that right out of verse 5, and we're going to unpack that as we go throughout this series. But God's intent for you and for me as His sons and daughters is not that we would merely survive or get through or make it by during this season or any season of our lives. God's plan is that we would thrive in Him. Now, in this season, it's kind of exposed the reality that some of us are not thriving, and some of us are waiting for whatever's next so that maybe we could thrive. But the reality is true that some of us were not thriving before pandemic, and we're not thriving in the midst of it, and we won't be thriving after it unless something changes in us and how we're responding to God. But what we want to lean into in this series is just to recognize that if we're just surviving, we're missing out. We are missing out on God's intent for us to enjoy overflow living. And so I just want to speak to some of us today that God's plan for your marriage is not that you would stay together for the kids or learn to peacefully coexist in the same house. God's intent for your work is not that you would just make it through another week, or that you would make it through, or you would survive another year going to a job that you hate because it pays the bills. It's not His plan for you. Or students in school, whether it's remote or getting back to school or you're off to college or whatever, God's plan for you is not that you would just make it, that you would survive your school years, but that you would thrive. God's plan is not that we would all pray a prayer and trust in Jesus and get our ticket to heaven and then hold on to that ticket to heaven while we live our lives pretty much like everybody else who doesn't profess to be a follower of Jesus, and we wait till we die, and we cash in our ticket. It's not God's plan. His plan for His children is that we would thrive, that we would experience His blessings overflowing in our lives, that you would be so full of God's peace and joy and presence and power and love that it would overflow and impact the people around you so that people would be looking at your life and go, how do I get what that person has? I want some of that in my marriage. I want some of that in my family, in my work life, in my school life, in my friendships and relationships. That we would be filled to overflowing. That's kind of the picture we get in Psalm 23, verse 5, right? That you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows with blessings. We'll unpack more of what that means throughout this series, but I'm going to jump to another passage in John chapter 10. And so this is words on the lips of Jesus, where He's describing the same thing as what we're talking about as overflow living in the series. John 10, verses 10 and 11 says this. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. Other versions of that passage describe the rich and satisfying life this way: as abundant life, as more and better life than you've ever dreamed of, as life in abundance to the full till it overflows. Or one of my favorites, the Passion Translation says, but I have come to give you everything in abundance, more than you expect. Life in fullness until you overflow. I love that, more than you expect. Life in its fullness till it overflows. It's more than you expect. When we talk about overflow living, that's what we're talking about. That God's plan for you, for your relationships, for your life, it's better than you expect. He intends abundance in you and through you and in your life. It's more than you can expect. It's more than most of us are experiencing, but it's God's intent for all of us to experience. And this is really important that you understand that overflow living, we're not describing something that is for the super spiritual. This is not for your saintly person, whoever you look at in your life as, oh, that person's spiritual. This is for ordinary, imperfect people like you and me, that this is God's plan for us. And it's not only for us when times are going well, when life is going as we hoped it would or as we planned for it to go. This is available to us all the time. We'll read in a few weeks, we'll focus on the passage where it says, even when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Another pastor has said recently, even when you walk through the valley of the shadow of COVID-19. Overflow living is God's intent for His people now and always. So I want to invite you to pause with me for a moment right now. We're talking about overflow living, better than you could expect, more than you could imagine, abundant, overflowing blessings in your life. And I want you to think for a moment, what is one or two ways in which you could imagine a life provided by God for you to enjoy that is better than you expect? I want you to think about a couple of specific areas in your life, like whatever comes to mind for you. Maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's in your family, maybe it's a particular friendship or relationship. Maybe your work life right now is the opposite of overflow. And you're going, that would be really nice to move towards overflow in work. Or maybe it's school, whatever it might be. Maybe it's your finances. What is one realm? Can you name for yourself, man, I can't imagine God doing this. It would be better than I would expect, but man, it would be nice to experience, to enjoy God's plan for my life of overflowing blessings in this realm. I hope you're thinking of something specific, because it's going to impact how you hear the rest of this message. If what you're thinking about is not completely selfishly motivated, but it's just a glimpse of God's intent for your life to experience overflow blessings, then I just want to ask this question. If you could experience that better than you expect, abundant overflow living in that realm, in multiple realms, in your life in general, would you be interested in moving toward that? I mean, are you sitting there thinking, okay, if that's God's plan, then how do I get that? How do I enjoy that? And as we ask that question, because that's a natural question, okay, if that's God's plan for us to enjoy that, how do we get there? That question kind of exposes our greatest obstacle, the greatest challenge for us to experience overflow living. And it's just this fundamental reality that we are consumers, living in a consumer-driven culture. And so we bring that consumer mentality to our pursuit of this life of our cup overflowing with blessings. And we import that. And so as good consumers, if we want something, some good service, product, then we pay the price and we get it. If you want a luxury car, you pay a luxury car price and then you enjoy it. If you want to be physically fit, then you pay the price. You go to the gym, you work out, and you experience being fit. If you want an average chicken sandwich, you go to Cane's. If you want a great, amazing chicken sandwich, you go to Chick-fil-A, right? So we're consumers. It's just how it works. I hope some of you Cane's lovers are squirming right now. You can comment and tell me how wrong I am, and I will pray for you, all right? It's okay. But we're consumers, and we import that into our pursuit of this life that God intends for us to live. But here's the catch. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so, yes, God's intent for us is to enjoy overflow living, but we can't acquire our cup overflowing with blessings just by doing it in kind of our typical American consumer-driven transactional way. And we get that in Psalm 23 in just the first short phrase, and we're kind of camping right there today. It starts out, you can probably say it by heart, the Lord is my shepherd. Lord is my shepherd. Overflow living cannot be acquired in our typical transactional method because overflow living is rooted in relationship with the Good Shepherd. It's all about relationship with the Good Shepherd. The progression in Psalm 23 kind of makes it clear that overflow living, it's verse 5, that this is a byproduct of us pursuing Jesus. It's not the goal, it's not the thing we grab and go for, it's the byproduct of pursuing Jesus. And so we're talking about overflow living, but we want to recognize that that's not the thing we're running after. That overflow living is the outcome of an ever-deepening relationship of surrendered trust and obedience with the Good Shepherd. So instead of running after the goal, we run after the relationship with Jesus. Instead of God handing us a cup overflowing with blessing for your marriage, for your finances, for your relationships, for your career, instead of giving you the cup overflowing with blessings that you want, God gives you Himself. Instead of God delivering on all of our wish lists, God invites us out of our consumerism and into relationship with Himself, where we discover all that the psalmist talks about in Psalm 23. Trusting in God's goodness, God's provision, God's protection, God's guidance and leadership in our lives, God's unfailing love, and God's mercy. God invites us to relationship. John 10, if we go back to those couple of verses there, helps us to maybe understand our struggle a little bit more. That passage says, Jesus says, in pursuit of our rich and satisfying life, there's an enemy of our souls who comes to steal and kill and destroy. And the enemy of our souls will often take our desire for abundant life and kind of twist it around so that even in our pursuit of God, we've all done this, myself included, we can pursue God for what God can give to us or do for us. We pursue God just to get something from God. God is our cosmic genie in a bottle or our perfect Santa Claus who's going to give us everything that we want. And here's the irony of that. When we're pursuing God to kind of get what we want, and that's our primary motivation, it can actually create distance in our relationship and end up not delivering the abundant life that we long for. Think about it in relationship maybe with your kids or maybe employees, right? When somebody comes to you and they just want to get something from you, does that strengthen or weaken your relationship? And some of you parents that are educating children at home are going, oh, that's just 24 hours of my day on an average day, right? My kids come and they want more, right? But when our kids come to us for relationship or when we're able to engage in relationship, that strengthens the relationship. And so when we come to God and we just want God to give us more, we're actually oftentimes missing out on the gift of abundant life that God intends for us. The other thing that Jesus' words maybe highlight for us is that this desire for abundant life, for overflow living, it's hardwired into us. It's what we were created for, to enjoy this kind of life. But the enemy of our souls, who comes to steal and kill and destroy, tries to convince us that we can accomplish that we can acquire that overflow life, that abundant life, through pursuing the people and things of this world. And so the enemy tries to convince us that if you just can get a nicer house, you get the nicer house and you fix it up the way you want, or if you can just get that next step up in your work world, you can get that promotion. Or you could just get this recognition academically or as an athlete. Or if you could just get this scholarship or just get accepted to this school. Or if you could just find the perfect Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. Then your life, then you would be overflowing with blessings. Then you would receive this abundant life that you're longing for. And those tactics, when we run after the things and people of the world, thinking that that's going to deliver the abundant life we long for, it always comes up short. It always comes up short because that is the enemy's number one tactic, to steal and kill and destroy, to rob us of the life that we were created to enjoy in Jesus. Because we're created to enjoy that in relationship with the Good Shepherd. And so when we begin to see maybe those things that we're running after as not the answer to our desire for overflow living, we might be getting a little closer to experiencing the abundant life that Jesus offers us. And so when we stop pursuing God for what God can give us or what God can do for us, and when we stop pursuing the people and things of this world to acquire the abundant life we desire, then we are nearing the beginning of our journey toward abundant life, toward overflow living. And when we come to the place where we are pursuing relationship with the Good Shepherd with reckless abandon, that spot right there, that is the beginning of overflow living. And we recognize that if the beginning is just running after Jesus, our Good Shepherd, that means that whatever you named a few moments ago when I said, where do you want to experience overflow living? What would that better than you expect life be? That we have to take those hopes and dreams and expectations and we just offer them to Jesus and we surrender those. We surrender control. We can surrender our plans to get there. We surrender our expectations and we say, God, I'm going to run after you. I'm going to follow you as my Good Shepherd. And whatever that path, whatever that journey produces, that's the life that I want to live. That's the overflow that I know you have created for me. Now, when we do that, one of the lessons we learn along the way is that our experience of overflow blessings often comes about in very unexpected ways because it's not my plan. If it's not my plan, I'm just running after Jesus, then He's going to provide overflow blessings in ways that often surprise me. I'll give you an example from my journey. So this has been 7 or so years ago. We had a staffing transition, and I'd really been wrestling with how we were going to lead our student ministry for our youth. And I decided this was like a 6-month prayerful wrestling match with God, but He seemed to be making it really clear that I should step into leading our student ministry, which I hadn't done in 10 or 15 years. And I was all worried about how much time that would take and maybe pull me away from my family, and wasn't sure how all of that was going to work out, but God seemed to make it clear that that was the right next step. And so I stepped into that with a lot of fear and uncertainty of leading our student ministry some years ago. Now, completely unrelated, that's what you got to hear, completely unrelated to that decision is this ongoing prayer that I always have for my family. Always I'm praying for my family that we would be growing together spiritually and that we would be serving together and bearing fruit and serving others and enjoy that together. And when I stepped into the student ministry, I thought it might be a hindrance to my family, a burden to my family. But what God did in those 5 years about where we were leading student ministry, and I say we because it ended up being my family doing this with a great team of amazing servant leaders, God poured out overflow blessings in that season in my relationship with my kids and with my wife and our family as a whole that I would have never guessed. It was better than I expected. It wasn't at all what I would have planned, but God did that. And the overflow blessings were the result not of my plan or strategy. See, usually I try to kind of twist the arms of my family into adopting my wonderful strategies. I'm a pastor. I get paid to think about these things, right? And I try to get them to execute my plan so we can grow spiritually and serve together. What God did in this season was teach me that, hey, just take the next step to obey me. Trust me. Trust my guidance, my leadership, my provision. And when I did that, God provided overflow blessings in another way that I would have never anticipated. And I want to tell you that I think that experience of overflow blessings is more the norm rather than the exception. And so think about this for a moment. If pursuing Jesus, not overflow blessings, is the path to overflow living, right? That's what we're saying. Don't pursue the overflow blessings. Pursue Jesus, and overflow blessings are the byproduct of that. It's the side benefit. Then our role to experience overflow living is not to try to come up with the ideal life that we're living in Christ and then figure out how to get there. God has made it so much more simple for us. Your job and mine, if you want to live this better than expected, overflowing, abundant life that God has created you to enjoy, you just listen to the Good Shepherd and you respond to His prompting. And so you might not realize it, but if God's working on you to forgive somebody who hurt you years ago, then lean into that. Respond to the prompting of the Good Shepherd, because what you might not realize is that step of forgiving that person is the very thing that's going to open up your heart so you can experience intimacy in your marriage or in some other relationship or friendship. And if God is prompting you to trust Him with your money and to give in different ways, you might not realize, but maybe God's prompting you to do that now because He wants to build your faith to see Him work in your life so that 6 months from now, when you go through something really hard, your faith has been strengthened in such a way that you can walk through that with confidence that God is with you, that He's going to provide for you. So it doesn't matter what the step is. The invitation is relationship with the Good Shepherd, and stepping into that, you're taking your next step of surrender, trust, and obedience. That is the path toward experiencing overflowing blessings in our lives. It's not do A, B, and C and God guarantees you X, Y, and Z. It's just one prescription. Surrender all of your hopes, dreams, expectations, prayers, and everything you want in your overflow life. Surrender all of that to Jesus, and then listen to the Good Shepherd and take the next best step of surrendered trust and obedience. So I want to invite you to kind of hang out right there with me. What would that look like for you? So at the very beginning of this journey for 8 weeks we're going to be walking through of overflow living. Whatever that is, and name that and pray for that, but instead of trying to develop a plan to get there, what if you set it aside and say, God, where are you inviting me to take a next step? I wonder, I'm just going to offer this, I wonder if the next step that God might invite many of us to take is one that's simply moving toward deeper relationship with Jesus. I mean, you want God's overflowing blessing in your finances, and maybe Jesus is saying, hey, I just want to spend some time with you each day. I'd love to start your day out just talking with you in prayer and offering you a word of good news from Scripture and experiencing time of worship with you. Or making this Sunday morning time of worship a rhythm that's kind of really set and that's part of your life where you're leaning into community and my presence with others. I wonder how many of us, that's the step. It's not about getting some goal or outcome we desire. It's just about responding to Jesus' invitation to deeper relationship. The way that God's going to make your relationship better than you expected and abundant is not by trying to fix that person or come up with the perfect plan to get there. It's going to be about leaning into relationship with Him. You want your career that's better than expected and a path that is abundant and overflowing with God's blessing? Well, take the next step to trust Jesus. Take the next step to pursue Him rather than pursuing what He can do for you or what He can give you. And so I want to kind of leave you there with that question. I'm going to invite Jason to come and get ready to lead a last song for us. But what is your best next step of surrendered trust and obedience to respond to Jesus? Anytime we take a next step of surrendered trust and obedience toward Jesus and with Him, we're taking a next step towards overflow living. We're not in control of the outcome. We don't get to determine the timeline, but that is the path of life that God invites us to be on. Now, I'm going to invite you as we get ready to sing this last song, maybe to consider this. Some of you might be courageous enough as you're praying, as you're worshiping with this last song, just put something in the comments that maybe something like my best next step is, and then fill in the blank. I wonder if we might see some comments like, I'm going to start reading my Bible this week more regularly. Or I'm going to download the YouVersion Bible app. Or I'm going to spend time praying. Or I'm going to connect with a spiritual mentor this week. Or I'm going to be here again next week and be a part of this worship gathering. What's your best next step the Good Shepherd is inviting you to take? You take that step, and God will make a way for you to experience His overflow blessings as you continue to run after Him with your whole heart. I'm going to invite us to respond in worship. You might need some moments to pray. You might want to stand and just engage with us. Let's offer our hearts in worship to a God who is at work in our lives.
Let's lift this up.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Sing it out. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, it's who you are, Lord. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, it's who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. 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 That is who you Light in the darkness. That is who Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Never stop, you never stop working. Never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Never stop, you never stop working. Never stop, come on church, sing it out. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Never stop, you never stop working. Never stop, you never stop, no. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Never stop, you never stop working. Never stop, you never stop, no, yeah. Waymaker, miracle worker,
reminders as we're heading out the door today, or as you're leaving your screen today. In your comments and the live stream, we put some questions out there that might help you continue to dig in. Might be for your own personal reflection, might be for discussion, maybe around your family or whoever you're watching with today or your watch party. Maybe you can dialogue around those questions, but our hope is just to keep digging in and keep leaning in to hear God speak a word of grace and vision for us. Also, for some of you, a next step worth considering is being a part of our Discover class. And so we'll be doing another one via Zoom, of course, at this point. It's going to be on a Tuesday and Thursday night, May 5 and 7 at 6 p.m. Discover kind of gives you who we are and gives you the roadmap for how you can engage and be traveling on this journey with us as we grow to follow Jesus together. And so you can sign up online for that. And then another important opportunity for some of you. So some of you have been wanting to serve and make a difference in our community. And we are right now in the process of figuring out what that's going to look like for Journey, partnering with other churches and nonprofits. And so at 2 p.m. today, I'm going to have a conversation via Zoom with anybody that wants to be a part of it to help us discern next steps. There's a plan that some of the churches and nonprofits have put together, and we're trying to figure out how are we going to engage, what's it look like for us to be responding to felt needs in our community in this season and beyond that. And so if you want to be a part of that 2 p.m. Zoom conversation with me, just comment in the live stream that you would like an invitation, and I'll send an email out here in just a little bit so you have that information and you can join us at 2 p.m. and we'll pray into what God has for us in those next steps. And the last thing, appreciate our prayer team that's been available throughout this service. And about 10 minutes after this service, we'll open up a new Zoom room. That'll be for me to connect with any of you that might have questions. You just want to chat and say hello. That'd be fine by me. I'd love to see your faces and connect with you in that way. And so just go to the online campus, and there's a link there that you can connect with me, and we'll do that in just a few minutes. It's been great to worship with you today. I'm praying for you this week. Let's keep praying for each other as we continue to take next steps following our Good Shepherd.